meet the fellow founder. So this is the goal for us. Yeah. Anyone else want to share like what you do, what's your occupation, or do you have a startup already? Are you on the ideation phase or something?
Yeah, I can go if nobody's going. I'm currently founding a startup in Berlin, in Germany, and we're building registration systems for refugees. And we're basically building an AI framework for integration of refugees and migrants in the government and in the business space.
Super.
Very cool.
Hey guys, I'm Adrian. I am the CTO of a venture studio in London, and yeah, we work with people from all around the world. Yeah, that's us.
Cool.
Very nice.
I guess hello. I'm Dimitri. I'm non-technical, and I have an idea for an app that I would like to bring to life with some more technical friends. So I'm here to learn on how to manage a technical team.
Got it.
Very smart.
Welcome, Dimitri. Just in case, a lot of people here might not actually know who I am, so I'm just gonna introduce myself as well, because I've realized when I go to my own events that people don't realize I am who I am. So so my name is Uday. I'm the founder and president of both Oxbridge-AI Challenge and Oxbridge-AIx. I'm also the secretary of Ox.AI and committee of Ox.AIN, which is the artificial intelligence network for alumni, essentially. I'm just really passionate about helping all of you build your dreams. I feel entrepreneurship is a path to finding fulfillment. It's a way of like manifesting an expression of who you are in a way to solve a really important problem. And so when I talk about this kind of stuff, I often encourage people to really dig deep and feel what do you give a shit about, what really pisses you off, and but that's not necessary for everyone, but that's just my way. I built this because I got really pissed off. I felt that everyone needed access and exposure, and having done this in between Palo Alto and 9 different places in the world, I felt like we deserved it. And we've got such great talent in this community, and we've got the opportunity to learn and work with awesome people like Pablo and Yannick. So I think we can really change the world together. With that, Dan, would you like to introduce yourself? You're on mute.
You're muted. Yep.
Apologies, guys. Good afternoon. Uday, good to finally see you. I look forward to seeing you in Oxford, London somewhere at some point. Yeah, really good to be able to join in. I'm normally in a car driving somewhere, so I'm delighted I can sit here and learn from some very smart people. But just a sort of quick, from my side of things, I've been involved in a biotech which involves some AI in Oxford for the last couple of years. Prior to that, I've also worked with a small tech firm involved with many defence clients utilising AI. So some things we can talk about, some we can't for obvious reasons. But I get your point today. There's loads of things going on. The pace of change, it's insane. I mean, it's not even weeks, it's days. It's just something every day. I don't know how any of us keep up to date, frankly. But I think these forums are great because you can kind of get rid of the noise and say, okay, what's really, really important? So yeah, I'm here to listen and learn. And regardless of what I know, I'm one of these lifelong learners. So really great to be here.
Awesome.
Nice
to have you, Dan, and looking forward to meeting in person soon. We are having a community hangout this Sunday right here in SW10 in London. So all of you are invited. Yeah. Just send me a shout on an email if you haven't already got the details. But so we're about to get started now. I just wanted to introduce Pablo and Yannick. So Pablo and Yannick have been building a lot of different tech for a lot of different people for quite some time. They've got I'm very impressed by their company Dewais. Is that how you pronounce it, guys? Because I always worry I read it wrong with my dyslexia.
It depends what part of the world you're in. Sometimes it's the Ways, sometimes it's the Vice, sometimes it's all good.
Yeah, okay, good to know. So, you know, we got introduced to Pablo and his team thanks to our community legend, Ash. And so we're very grateful that this is the second masterclass they're doing with us. And we've got another thing in store soon. But there's just so many learnings. And I would encourage everyone to ask questions when the time comes. But please switch on your videos when you do and introduce yourself, because the community is built on trust, support, and collaboration. And the best way to build trust is for people to actually know each other.
And just to add
that,
a little, so when Uday mentioned that it would be cool to present a topic like how to manage a tech team, I could not think of any better person as Yannick, who is like super knowledgeable, 30 years in the industry, and he's one of the best when we're speaking about Scrum, Agile, managing the tech team. So yeah, he's here to share all his knowledge. Please feel free to ask any question that you might have during.
Well, thank you. That's quite an introduction, and hopefully I live up to my to your expectations at this point. Let's see. So I think we're ready to go, Uday.
Floor is all yours.
All right, wonderful. So before I get started, I'm going to share my screen in a moment. I've got a little presentation. We're going to be talking about 3 topics. Before I get started, though, I was thinking about this in detail, and I thought, you know, I think the most important thing, no matter what you do, no matter what methodologies, no matter what you end up, whether you end up in a complex project or a simple project, or, you know, the most important thing, and I think it's overlooked easily, is to get the right people in place. It's to hire the right people. It's to take the time to hire either an agency or a person, whatever you're going to do. It's to take the time to really make sure they're the right fit, they're the right person for the team, the right person for the project. Investing that time up front makes all the difference in the end. I say that because as a former CTO and as, you know, a person who's been director of many levels for a long time, I don't like to manage people. I don't believe in managing people. I think people should be there, motivated. They should be ready to work, ready to provide a lot of their brain trust, you know. That's why they're being hired. And so I want to really emphasize this piece of it, that it's really important to take your time to sift through the right people, give them a chance to show their true colors, and then decide whether they should stay or they should go, you know, but make that decision, you know, within the first 90 days of people joining your team. I think that's the most important thing you can do to help yourself. All right, and that goes, you know, whether it's remote, in person, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. Okay, let me share my screen. Pablo, can you see my screen?
Yeah, all perfect.
Thank you. So some of the topics I'm going to touch on, you may have heard of before, you may know very well. This may be new to you. Either way, I'm going to try to stop and let you guys ask questions, whether it's, you know, to find out something about the concepts, or whether it's an experience you want to share, or questions you have with regards to how best to manage certain things. All right, today I'd like to talk about Agile, Lean, and Scrum. Whoops, there we go. Let's get started. Agile, Lean, and Scrum in a very brief fashion. We're not going to get too much in detail, except for Scrum. Scrum I'm going to touch on a lot more. All right, so here we go. So what is Agile? Well, Agile is a philosophy. It's a mindset. It's a way of operating. It was born out of rigid project management practices such as waterfall, which you may have heard of and may have used in the past. And it has 4 important values. It actually has 12, but 4 of them stand out. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. and responding to change over following a plan. So that's a completely different approach than, waterfall, if you ever had the displeasure or the unfortunate reality of dealing with waterfall methodologies. Next up, we have what is lean. Lean is an agile startup methodology emphasizing rapid experimentation and iterative product releases. At its core, it's got 4 fundamental principles. So build, measure, and learn, rather. Validated learning, innovation accounting, and fail fast. So these notions, the first one is build, measure, learn, which is your feedback loop, right? This continuous feedback loop involves creating a minimum viable product, so your MVP, measuring customer response, and learning from the results to inform the next iteration. So it's an empirical process. Validated learning, rather than making assumptions about what customers want, founders gather empirical evidence through real customer interactions and adjust accordingly. That's really important. So that feedback loop, always getting feedback from your end user, and either by getting, chat boxes and so on and so forth, they can implement within your app, or giving them a mechanism by which they can give you feedback as they're using your app becomes critical. Innovation accounting. This involves establishing metrics that meaningfully track progress rather than relying on vanity metrics. Vanity metrics being, oh, I think this is what my user wants. I believe this is going to be better than that. That kind of notion is vanity. It might look impressive, but it doesn't reflect what actual business health, the actual business health that is going on right now. And fail fast is the idea that you want to take whatever feature, whether it's a big feature or a small feature, and you want to see it succeed or fail as quickly as possible. You want to be able to decide whether you keep that feature, whether you enhance that feature, or whether you let go of that feature altogether. And you do that by measuring, essentially by building, measuring, and learning, which are the first core principles of this particular methodology. I'm going to stop soon to ask questions, but I just want to go through one more. What is Scrum? Scrum provides just enough structure for people and teams to integrate into how they work. Scrum is a framework for implementing Agile, and it's designed for complex product development. It consists of specific roles, events, and artifacts. It enables teams to deliver value incrementally. And today we're going to dive more into Scrum. And so I'm just going to show you, every aspect of it in relative detail. So we had what is Agile, what is Scrum, what is Agile, what is Lean, what is Scrum. Now we have what is love, baby don't hurt me no more. Moving on. I want to know from you. I want to hear from you guys if you have any questions. I just want to do a quick recap. The recurring themes in both in the 3 rather concepts we just looked at, Agile, Lean, and Scrum, are empirical and iterative processes. And I think that's the key here, is to understand that everything we do, we build on top of what we've learned, and that we have this continuous loop, both in terms of feedback and in terms of progress, that we consistently work with and move forward with. So are there any questions so far? Any comments, any experiences you want to share, any concerns you have? Now's a good time to ask.
I've got one.
Yep.
I find that, so I've worked in corporate for 5 years, like in Scrum teams, and they work really good, but I feel like it works the best when you implement pure Scrum with a Scrum Master.
Yes.
I feel like a mutated version of Scrum is actually really dysfunctional, and I've always hated it.
A man after my own heart. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and you make a very, very, very important point here, is that, you know, I was going to ask the question, hey, how many of you have done Scrum before? You know, and I'm sure I'd see some hands up. But how many of you have done real Scrum before? And that's the key. Yeah, and it's all the difference. The mutated version of Scrum typically is not as successful. It's just not Scrum. It should be called something else. Scrum is very oh, let me go back into the screen. There we go. Scrum is a very lightweight framework, you know, and it's by design that it's lightweight. However, it needs to be followed to a T. So for those of you who have experience with Scrum, I might bore you for a little bit. I'm just going to go through the concepts of Scrum, but, you know, keep in mind this, the whole point is going to be to have a conversation, you know, afterwards, and to kind of go through some experiences, etc. All right, so the 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, adaptation. Transparency is so everyone sees what's going on at any point in time. The inspection is regular checkpoints to assess progress, and adaptations, the ability to pivot based on the feedback that you receive. So as we look at this, we also see, you know, the agile philosophy seep into this methodology, right? Scrum is a simple framework with only a few roles. The roles are product owner, Scrum Master, the development team, and stakeholders. The product owner, probably the toughest job in the entire Scrum ecosystem, in my opinion, represents the stakeholders' interests, maintains the product backlog, decides priorities and acceptance criteria. Very difficult job. You need to be on all the time. You need to be able to respond to answer any questions that the development team may have. So it's a very difficult role. Scrum Master facilitates the Scrum process, removes impediments, coaches the team on agile practices. So that's the point that Adrian just made, that having a proper Scrum Master makes a big difference in utilizing Scrum. The development team are all the engineers and designers who are involved in the project. They're all equally responsible for the work that needs to get done. And lastly, the stakeholders, any parties who have some interest in the project, in either an investor or, you know, a CEO, a CTO, that sort of thing, or a founder, etc. Scrum is broken down into certain events. You have the sprint, which is a duration of time. Typically it's 2 weeks. Can be up to a month, but that's a bad choice typically. Depends on the context, but typically 2 weeks is what you want to shoot for. It's just enough time for developers to get the focus they need, and it's not too much time so that you can't pivot quickly. Planning sessions, they occur at the beginning of each sprint. They last anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, depending on the size of the team and the size of the project. Review sessions occurs at the end of each sprint, lasts about 1 to 2 hours. In that meeting, we typically demo the work that was accomplished through the sprint. A retrospective, which occurs at the end of each sprint, is about an hour long, and that allows the team to openly discuss and build on whatever successes and failures that they've experienced through the sprint. So they constantly improve their process incrementally as things progress. And lastly, we have the daily Scrum, which is a 15-minute meeting, no more than 15 minutes, typically in a stand-up format. During that meeting, only devs and Scrum Masters are present. So only only 3 questions are asked. It's, what did you do? What have you been working on? What are you working on? And are you blocked? That's it. This is not a meeting to have a conversation. It's not a meeting to elaborate in any fashion. If you are blocked, if there is something that needs to be discussed, usually the Scrum Master will sidebar with the few people who need to be involved in that particular. I just saw comments here. I'm sorry. I see what the chat says. Definitely cover. Yeah, it requires budget to cover all roles for sure. All right. Scrum artifacts. You have the product backlog, which is essentially every single piece of information that make up the project. You have the sprint backlog, which is what the team decided to work on, committed to work on with the product owner. So those are the work items that are being accepted by the development team. You have epics, which are large stories that kind of give a brief idea of, what the feature should look like, what we're trying to achieve in a very vast way. You have user stories, which are essentially the breakdown of epics into smaller pieces. The definition of a partial or complete feature that can be estimated, prioritized, and executed by the Scrum team. You have an increment, which is a completed functional piece of software that provides value to the user. And that right there provides value to the user. That is the goal. That is the goal from the product owner's perspective. That is the goal from the developer's perspective. Constantly thinking about where's the value to the user. And, so that's how essentially a product owner will prioritize a story and promote it by understanding, little effort versus large effort to accomplish a story. Little effort with high value. Obviously, we want to promote that story, right? And we can talk about that in a little bit. And lastly, there's the definition of done, which is often forgotten, often lost, often ignored. But the definition of done is essentially an accepted set of conditions to be met by the team to say, okay, this piece of work is done officially. All right, and that's I've often seen this being ignored, unfortunately. So this is the Scrum process right here. So you have your product backlog, where all the epics and stories exist. We go through a sprint planning meeting where we discuss the priorities, all the stories that the product owner would like to see done within the sprint. There's a negotiation with the team that occurs, and all of this is being overseen by the Scrum Master in terms of keeping things fair and keeping things on task. And eventually our sprint backlog is ready after the planning session. And at that point, we start our cycle of 2 weeks, or 1 to 4 weeks, but typically 2 weeks. During that cycle, we have our every 24 hour, we have our 15-minute stand up at the same time, the same place, so we're consistent. And at the end of that, we end up with an increment of work that essentially stacks upon whatever other pieces of work were done before to improve the product. After that, we end up with our sprint review. We end up with our retrospective. In our sprint review, we have everybody of interest. So that could be the entire dev team, the stakeholders, everybody's involved who wants to be involved in terms of the stakeholders. And roughly that's what it looks like Scrum process wise. after that, I wanted to talk about what it looks like on the board and so on and so forth. But I'd like to start questions and conversations here, if that's all right, and then we can look at more details after that. So I'm seeing a lot of comments that I missed. Okay, one of the questions that I have here, why do you think companies shift from being truly agile to adopting frameworks like SAFe as they scale? Well, that's interesting. Usually larger companies have compliance that they need to contend with. That's what leads them to SAFe typically. And you're going to see that in corporations, much larger companies. But I think typically it would be compliance would lead them there. Agile generally is not necessarily not being implemented when SAFe is being implemented. It's not necessarily in opposition to. It's kind of an enhancement to. Next question, have you experimented with Basecamp's shape-up model 6-week cycle? I have not. Who asked this question, and can you share? That's Amin, correct?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So I was like eating lunch at the same time because it was between my meetings. But
I would do the same thing if I could.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we did try Shape Up a couple of times, and what we found is great is for more innovative initiatives that there are a lot of unknowns. We needed that extra time for validation, but I was wondering if you had experimented with it, and then do you have a hybrid model? Like there are sprints that you follow a different cycle than the other, depending on the amount of complexity that you have to deal with?
That's a good question. All good questions. No, I don't have the experience with the 6-week cycle, and Basecamp Shape Up is news to me. I've stayed away from Basecamp for years. Basecamp started as a good idea a long time ago, and then it went downhill fast. And then it's probably revitalized itself, and I just didn't pay attention. If that makes any sense to you. And so I've not paid attention at all to what they're up to.
But
with
if you
regards,
I want to add, like the main idea, as far as I know about Basecamp, is that they emphasize the importance of when you are on a planning session, like you already have a backlog where all the tasks are described, are full, like you're not taking anything not prepared. Like I think in a usual Scrum where we work, we have a grooming session that is kind of replaces this for the Basecamp.
Makes sense.
Yeah. With regards to hybrid, are you talking hybrid in different cycles, or are you talking hybrid in different methodologies?
In terms of like way of working, because every company I've been at, it's always like to your point, either like a 2 weeks or a 3-week sprint. But I don't know, the way I think about it is that every sprint can be drastically different than the next one, depending on the scope of the work, the complexity of work, and the stage of the product. That's why I'm surprised that companies don't. And maybe there's a reason for it, that don't follow a hybrid model and changing the length of the sprint depending on what they have to focus on.
There's something I want to, you bring up a point here. I'm just going to go to this slide right away. This is the 12 tenets of Agile. And one of the tenets is really key to what you just said here. Number 8, Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. And so you just said something. You just said, it depends on the scope of the sprint. Well, technically, the scope of the sprint should in essence be the same every time in terms of quantity of effort. And does that make any sense?
Yeah, for sure. And it does, to a point, force all the stakeholders to really decide what or what that minimum viable product is, and it helps with scoping, to your point, to make sure that there's, absolutely. Yep, makes sense.
I think it's really important to understand that we're not trying to, we call it a sprint, but we're not trying to overload ourselves to the point where we burn out, etc. Right, which happens too often. Let me see what else we have question-wise. Pablo brought up that it requires budget to cover all roles. Yes, and good understanding why we are doing this. Yes, and all roles are necessary to achieve Scrum, but you can share roles. For example, unless you work in a really big organization, it's rare that a Scrum Master will be a Scrum Master and nothing else. You know, oftentimes Scrum Masters would be, maybe a QA manager, or some other role, and also be the Scrum Master in smaller organizations. I don't suggest splitting up the product owner. The product owner is, like I said, probably the most difficult role in all of it. But yeah.
May I share like one statement? I'm curious to hear your opinion, Yannick, about that. So
Sure.
For me, when I worked on a variety of projects, and how I understand like the most critical and important parts in a Scrum is really to follow the process. And one of the things that are super important is to have a grooming session in the middle of the sprint where product owner or project manager will do everything possible to detailize the stories, make them available for developers so developers can check before the planning, and ideally estimate before the planning. So on the planning session, it's a short one when we actually commit to do the work during the sprint. And the commitment of your team, like we rely on all team members, like they should be knowledgeable, they should understand what they're doing, and if not, it will be like other tickets, like investigation tickets or something. So team commits to do the certain tasks in a certain period of time, and this is how you can actually do the planning. So you can be sure that all the tasks, they will not be dragged into another sprint and another sprint if the process is followed.
Well, so, okay, that's a lot to unpack. Yes, what you said is correct. For one, the product owner receives information from, I'm just going to walk through a product owner's life for a minute. The product owner receives information from the shareholders, the stakeholders, rather, not the shareholders. Hey, I have an idea. So I'm a founder, I have an idea. I want to build this, app X, and here's what app X does. The product owner breaks it down, in big chunks, big epics. Like, okay, you want people to log in and have a profile. You want people to do X, and you want people to do Y within the app. And those are large ideas called epics. At some point, the prioritization of these things, of these stories, will need to happen. It's going to be really important for the product owner to be able to rely on the team to, as you mentioned, groom, or depending on what part of the world you are, refine the stories. So the product owner took those epics, broke them down into user stories. There's a user story on the board right now, and I want to speak about what it is and how to properly put one together. And again, just as there are people who do Scrum and essentially end up cheating on Scrum and doing Scrum that is modified, a lot of people don't understand the real purpose of a user story and what it carries. So the structure is right here on the pinned note. As a role, I want, goal, so that benefit or value, right? And then we want to define the acceptance criteria, which will be the conditions of satisfaction for what we're trying to achieve. So this ends up being, as an account manager, I want a sales report of my account to be sent to my inbox daily. Why? So that I can monitor the sales progress of my customer portfolio. So as a product owner, I understand all of a sudden the value. This is what it means to them, you know, so they can actually check on the progress of their customers' portfolio. As the developer, it gives you the value as well. And that's really important. Without the value, you only have, as an account manager, I want a sales report of my account to be sent to my inbox daily. Okay, but I don't know the value of this, right? And that value component is going to help me as a product owner to prioritize that story amongst other criteria to prioritize. Then my acceptance criteria is going to be the report is sent daily to my inbox. The report contains the following sales details, X, Y, and Z. We can imagine what's going to be in there. And the report is in CSV format. So if we can satisfy these criteria, this is going to be a successful user story. It's going to be a successful product increment at the end of the sprint. You were just talking, Pavlo, you were just saying, you were just making an important point. I just want to revisit it, and now I've lost it. So I'm sorry.
About the grooming session, about the
the grooming session. So the refinement session. So what's missing here in the user story that we don't see is how we measure effort, right? Which will vary from team to team. Some teams will use concepts such as t-shirt size, you know, small, medium, large, extra large. Some people will use Fibonacci sequence starting from 1 to 21. And then, you know, every increment above being exponentially larger. So 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And then some other people will use hours. So some people decide, okay, I need to know how many hours it's going to take to do something, which is kind of an anti-pattern, hours, because when we think of effort, the effort to achieve something is, first of all, it's difficult to say how long it's going to take to do something, because we may have never done it before, or we may not know certain components that we are dependent on. You know, there might be some black box scenarios and so on and so forth that we need to consider. So ultimately, as a team, we get together and discuss that story. And then with everybody's input, everybody's experience, we can decide, okay, well, we think it's going to be X in terms of effort. And usually that's a process. We'll do like a Scrum poker, where essentially the Scrum Master will allow users to vote on what they think the effort is going to be. The dev team, when I say users, I meant dev team, to vote on what the effort's going to be. And then you end up with an effort. So to Pablo's point, doing a refinement session prior to the planning session. So in Scrum, you're allowed to use up to 20% of the developer's time to help the product owner refine. That's one of the rules. So it's really important that the product owner gets a chance to get feedback from the team prior to the planning session, so they can actually start prioritizing stories, start preparing what should be done, how, you know, and what should be done first. Yeah, I think that covers what you just mentioned. Is there anybody got anything else they'd like to ask or discuss? There's tons to cover, so I just kept this really high level right now. but I can dig into techniques and strategies.
Yeah, maybe if
wondering-
someone has the case where you need help with.
So Yannick, I have a question.
Yeah.
So so my background is product, and so I'm tend to be the product owner or product dev, and there's also a new role that we're seeing a lot as product engineer. It's kind of someone, especially with these AI tools, kind of doing a bit of both. So, but a challenge I have is, I tend to take too much on, and so I tend to even become the Scrum Master. So how do you, you mentioned earlier, it's like quite a lot. Any advice you have to better manage even the fundamentals?
Well, if you're product owner and you take on product Scrum Master, typically that's anti-Scrum, right? Because you can't be the referee and the player at the same time. And the Scrum Master is mostly the referee, and that's key, to the success of the team. So where the Scrum Master's role shines is when the product owner wants to, in planning sessions, when the product owner wants X amount done within a sprint, and the team disagrees. In other words, by the way they express the effort necessary to achieve, all these things, based on their velocity from the past, you can determine, well, it's not going to be achievable. That's where a product owner oftentimes might say, yeah, but this is really important because the CEO really needs this out, and blah, 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 and this and that. Or that's where the Scrum Master comes in as a referee and makes the team be able to sustain a certain pace without pushing too hard, right? That's part of the role of the Scrum Master. So to answer your question, you take on too much. Well, talk to me a little more. What feels like too much for you? Is it the fact that you take on Scrum Master, or is it really that the product ownership role is a lot?
The challenge I have personally is that I'm dyslexic. As a consequence of that, it takes, the initial planning I get very focused on, just takes me a bit of time, So I would spend like flat out nonstop 2 weeks on planning and then preparing everything. So I have everything in GitHub kind of organized. And then with the team, especially with my CTO, we have a lot of communication, and so then I'm available to be very flexible around what people need. We tend to be slightly longer than 2 week sprints, just because, personally, I have a bad habit of scope creep, like there's no tomorrow. But that's just, that's something I've been working on long term. But I feel that we've always been very lean as a team. So I think part of the solution feels from listening to you today is that we just need to actually sacrifice spaces and make sure that we just have extra hands on deck, so someone to actually be the Scrum Master. I'm also wondering if people should rotate being the Scrum Master.
Well, there are a couple of things you said that are red flags to me. Scope creep's a problem. As a product owner, you definitely want to push as hard as you can, and that's usually part of the role. And you want to see as much value provided as quickly as possible for your end user, and that's part of it. To your point, yes, you should have the right roles in place, because otherwise you're doing a modified Scrum, which leads me to, well, why not do Kanban then? If you guys can't commit to Scrum, can you commit to Kanban, and can you be successful in that approach?
Yeah, we tend to default back to Kanban, but it's just so my CTO's wife, she's also a developer. When she can, she becomes Scrum Master. Otherwise, we default to Kanban.
Yeah. So I hate to say it, it's just a question of discipline in this case. It's accepting that you're not gonna produce as much work necessarily per sprint. You're not, but call a sprint and don't extend it. And Pablo earlier mentioned something about tasks going from one sprint to the next. That's a huge no-no technically, because the dev team commits to the work. That's the key. Like when they accept to do a user story in the sprint, they committed to it. So it doesn't matter if it takes them longer or shorter to get something done. It's important that they get it done. And I think that is lost as well on people, that commitment aspect. In that statement I made earlier, that it is all engineers and designers equal responsibility to achieve, yeah, that's part of what's going to make it successful. Otherwise, yeah, so it's just a matter of discipline from that point of view, which is kind of tricky and it's very difficult. Scrum is notoriously difficult because of that. It is simple, but it's about the discipline you apply, to make it successful.
I do have a follow-up question, but I just want to, I'm going to type it out because, just in case other people have other questions, but it revolves around with the use of AI tools to code, I feel like the pressure to be even more lean as a team kind of has a kind of negative impact in terms of how to manage product development as well, because there's just more you can do, but at the same time, it's important to have that discipline. So I'm just putting it as a question, but please continue. Thank you very much for answering my question.
Of course. Yeah, the floor is open if anyone else wants to jump in. There's just so much to discuss, and I'm happy to. Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
Hey, Yannick, thank you for the insightful session.
Yep.
For one question we have is, we found a lot of tasks is still in the R&D, not R&D. It's we're deep tech AI company, so we spend a lot of time to test a model, and we found it's very hard to estimate how long each task will take, because it could be just exploring, like trial and error on different algorithm, and it's very hard to say you need to get it answer in 2 weeks, and just impossible. Then we got this scenario, it's constantly the deadline got kick it back, and which is understandable because it's always exploring process. So just trying to understand, in this circumstance, do you have any suggestions for us how to still honor people's efforts but also keep the deadline?
Well, okay, so it's an empirical process. So you build on what you've learned, right? So if you're at the beginning of the project and you're faced with, providing effort estimations for a given algorithm, it may be super difficult. So you go with your best bet. You go with your best gut feeling. This is going to be 21. It's so big. It's going to take us all sprint probably. Or half the sprint. But the following sprint, you've learned something here. And technically, you should expect the engineers to be able to look back on what it took to do, the first algorithm, and what pieces they can actually kind of correlate and compare and say, okay, well, this is similar to that, this is similar to this. So maybe we can, have a better sense of estimation. They should always look backwards on what they've accomplished or what they've done in the past to be able to estimate. Am I making sense to you? Am I helping?
Yeah, so you mean that we looking back on things, on what we learned, then we plan accordingly in the next sprint. But yeah. I think the challenge for the team is, for example, we have one task, and that task, because no one knows how long it's gonna take, and we put like arbitrary, like 1 month, like 2 sprints. Then get after 2 sprints, and people found, actually we're not even close to that, and it's keep sleeping for the next 2 or 3 sprints and push other things out. So it's like you will see the screen that's all the things that get overdue because of that. Then it just not looks good, and it's very discouraging for people from team moral point of view.
For sure. It should not happen that way, so clearly there's a problem. Let's discuss this a little bit. Do you break down, so okay, this is a Scrum board. It's usually using Azure DevOps. It's using hours, unfortunately, which is just a sample I just grabbed real quick. But this is your user story. Once the sprint starts, your developers should break down tasks from the user story. Do they do that?
Currently, it's me working with them, and we break down together.
So you break down together?
Yes.
You're product owner?
I'm the product owner.
Okay. So, but they do create tasks, right?
Yes.
And those tasks make up the bulk of your user story. They cover everything.
Correct.
Okay. And so they still can't estimate, because essentially what you can do is once you may have estimated this for 10 hours, and look, this is perfect math here. This is 5 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, and of course it's 10 hours. However, they may come up with, okay, now we break it down in details and we realize, this is a 10-hour task here, or you see what I mean? And then that might give them better insights, or do the opposite. At the end, qualify every one of them and change the effort. So in your retro, go back and look at, okay, this task ended up being, what level, re-estimate after the fact. So you have your estimation at the beginning, do an estimation at the end to help you decide how to move forward. Does that make sense? Well, at first you're estimating. At the end, you have your final number, right?
Correct.
So at the end, you can go back. They can go back and say, okay, well, this task, we thought it was a 2, but it really was a 5.
Mm-hmm.
So make note of that, so you can learn, so they can learn. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's the best way you can get yourself out of trouble at first, and then eventually that should go away. You shouldn't need that method anymore, but that's one way you can do it.
And if we find more information during the sprint, do you suggest us to change the deadline accordingly based on the new information?
You never change anything during the sprint. A sprint is locked in.
But what if for mid of the sprint we found we underestimate how many hours, how many days it will take, and everyone clear now it's impossible for us to finish by this sprint. So what should we do?
So as a product owner, you have 2 options. One, you stop the sprint. You're the only person who's allowed to stop a sprint. You stop a sprint, then you reorganize, you do a new planning session, and you re-estimate based on your newfound knowledge. That's an option. The other option is you remove from your sprint, and you agree that you'll remove certain stories and let them focus on what's accomplishable. I would favor the first option. I would favor the stop the show. Let's re-estimate. Let's get good at estimation. Clearly, we're bad at estimation. We need to get good at it. So the more we do it, the better we get. That's my view of it.
Understood. Right. Really insightful. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
We have a question from Amin Bashi. Amin, could you also introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. My name is Amin, and I've been same as what you were talking about. We've been doing a lot of agile work in product management and leading mega projects and major programs. And one of the recent engagements we had was with a company called Amadeus, so in the travel space, and I led their product transformation modeling for them for more than 650 product managers and product marketing managers. And we did train them on the best product management practices, but the thing that they're still struggling with is when it comes to the kind of software development. They're following this kind of scaled agile framework. They all have been trained on SAFe. They spend a lot of money, so there's a bit of a sunk cost fallacy. They really want to keep that SAFe methodology in place, but it's just not agile, right? Like everyone hates it. Everyone at the organization, they want to get rid of it. So I was wondering, what would you, if you were to redesign SAFe, what would that look like? What components do you think are actually valuable and they should be followed? And which ones would you remove or update to make it more effective and actually agile?
To be able to answer your question, I would have to have a much better knowledge of SAFe, which is limited at best. It's not something I've spent a lot of time with, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, for obvious reasons. So I don't really have an answer for you, unfortunately, which components I would remove and how I would, rethink it. But that puts you in a position where you would like to propose some changes, I understand.
Exactly. And kind of making it work for the organization in a way that the one component that they really like about SAFe is predictability. So they usually sell them to CIOs and CEOs. They love it, right? They know, like,
yep.
For the next planning cycle, this is what's going to be released. This is going to be the potential impact, and that they like. But I think there are other ways to achieve the same outcome without following which is a very waterfall approach of SAFe, which adds a lot of constraints for software developers and teams to actually react to what the users want, what the customers want. I don't have an answer either, but I just know that there are a lot of organizations that are looking for a better alternative to SAFe.
Yeah. Well, Scrum, Agile Scrum, that's a good one.
Yeah, no, for sure. But no plan.
Yeah, I think the one thing it's lacking is the ability for a certain type of reporting that C-levels like to see and like to have. That's what's lacking in Scrum, in my opinion. However, with the right tool set, you can actually come close. Azure DevOps is a good example of a good tool set. There's pretty in-depth reporting that can be done there and gives you a good sense of trends over time to see if you can achieve your goals. It's pretty tricky. So sorry I can't go more in depth on that one.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll definitely check out Microsoft Azure's DevOps. Yeah, I've heard great things about it too.
Yeah. The question, Uday, you have a question with AI tools for development. It feels there's more pressure to fuse roles as more as possible and potentially faster. How do you and Pavlo feel one should manage developing with these new tools in consideration of tech team management? Should anything actually change? Actually, as a product owner, I'm so empowered to MVP so quickly. I think nothing should change. It just becomes a question of your dev team's estimation. They need to consider their new reality. It's just a new tool that accelerates a lot of their processes, unless you're gonna, there's only so much vibe coding you're gonna want to do as a team. They still need to get their hands in there and review everything. And technically it should accelerate your sprints. Your velocity should increase in theory. Do I see anything should change? No, I don't see why it should. You still go through the same motions, right? You're still trying to, it's probably putting more pressure on you as a product owner because you need to produce a whole lot more, a lot faster. Is that where your pain point is?
Yeah, it's the volume is excessive sometimes. It's also like it's more. This is me sharing with the community. I hope watching me struggle is very useful for the others. But it's like I'm forced to. I'm capable of doing like multiple MVPs for different things in a shorter period of time, and it's working, but it's like it's exhausting, you know.
So one thing I could recommend is, sorry to interrupt you, is to put a Scrum Master in place and leverage your Scrum Master as a helper in putting, you know, like putting your stories together, how giving you a hand in organizing your stories a little bit, you know. I think there's nothing wrong with that, asking the Scrum Master to assist at a certain percentage of the time, at least, you know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make it like a full-time gig, obviously, because
Yeah. Yeah.
but having assistance from a Scrum Master, you know, it's not unheard of. I've seen it. I've done it. Yeah.
Because we're seeing, so we had there's a very exceptional talent in the community. I mean, everyone's quite exceptional, who's been offered opportunity in the Bay over the summer as a product engineer, and the description is basically doing both product and being the engineer. And so I saw that as first of all, as a young person wanting to do their own startup, I saw that as a great opportunity to get your hands dirty and to learn. But it feels like a fusion of roles, and it kind of just feels like what I'm doing a lot right now. So that's why I was also curious.
Yeah, no, it's anti-Scrum. There's no question. Scrum doesn't want it. You know, it's a question of what you can afford to do, right? And both from a resource point of view and a, you know, I mean, it comes down to resources, bottom line.
Yeah. I mean,
If
that, to be honest, your red flags that you point out with my situation has always been a problem of resources. I've just been very good at being lean, and making it happen. It just comes at a huge expense. So I burn out on average twice a year. I've
Right,
burned out
which
so
is
much that I've come out with a system of how to unburn out because it
yeah, but
happens so
that gets
often.
old. I mean, you know, after
Yeah.
after 20 years of doing it, 30 years of doing it, you can't afford to burn out. You just can't.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't know if other people have questions, but I have one last question just in case we get the time, but I would love to prioritize the others. My question is slightly a tangent. It revolves around, so I'm thinking a lot for the past few weeks about how, when with the rate of change of technology that we're seeing, how do you actually plan your tech team to build when you know that something is going to be different 6 months from now and a year from now? It's like, it feels like I don't know if I have the enough experience, but I'm trying to figure out how to add more agility within the base. And it's not just changing an LLM. The technologies that are coming out are dramatically growing and different. And so perhaps, you know, I have a good feeling out of anyone I know, you guys are doing so much that you might have been thinking about this.
Well, yes and no. Let me pause your question. Let me prioritize anybody else, and I'll get back to your question. Is that fair?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have
Love
it
it.
registered. Anyone else have a question or a comment? I might have.
Just one quick question. From all the retro sessions you've seen that have been very effective and the ones that the teams did it just for the sake of doing the retro, what do you think stands out? What are the most important things that most successful teams do in the retro that you've seen that's really important to follow?
Wow, that's a very good question. Having a Scrum Master who knows how to handle the room is really important, who can establish trust where everyone can speak freely. And speaking freely, you need to be brave. And one of the values of Scrum engineers is to be brave, right? And because it's not always easy to say, well, you know, if so and so pulled their weight, we would actually have finished the sprint on time, you know, that sort of thing, which is no finger pointing kind of situation necessarily, but it's more like being able to speak the truth to whomever, being and feeling like you're not going to be so having a good team where the elements are right is really critical. Being able to share the good and the bad, and not being afraid of repercussion, but understanding how, how in the diplomatic manner, how to express what didn't go well and why, and making a note of it. So from an actionable point of view, you want to maintain a board of what's been discussed and what you guys all decided to act on, right? So you kind of you maintain a separate board of things to improve on, and you agree to work on these things together. So that's another thing to do in your retro, that is not just going through the motions, but it's like another commitment that the team makes, like, okay, let's improve this and let's improve that, and then there are things you're still working on that are going to be sitting in progress. We're still working on improving our estimation, for Leo earlier. That's going to be something, Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, it requires a lot of soft skills in that meeting.
Yeah,
From everybody. Yeah,
psychological safety for sharing, for sure.
Yes, and to have the right Scrum Master to be able to establish that environment, is really important. So, I said I remembered your question, Uday, but hang on.
Technology changes a lot.
Yeah, technology changes.
Yeah.
So that's been a fact for so long. It's been a fact since the 50s. We're not using punch cards anymore, but when they were using punch cards, they weren't thinking about things that they couldn't predict. I think it kind of aligns with the Yagni concept. You ain't gonna need it. You cannot think too far ahead about what features you should have or shouldn't have, about what your fundamentals should be or shouldn't be. You need to build based on what you know to be true and what you know to be to serve your users best at that point in time. And that decision may be the right one, maybe the wrong one, but time will tell you, and time will, in an iterative manner, will push you in a position where you're going to have to modify that piece, or you're going to have to modify your fundamentals. That's just, we can't apply so much thought to what could be, right? Don't think about what could be. It's you could go in too many directions for the wrong reasons, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're going with this. So if I could bounce off you right now, assuming no one else has more questions. Yannick, do you have time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to some extent, I am over architecting it in my head, right? But it's more like, if I had to visualize, I'm trying to make the container with a hole in between, so that the hole can have different I can replace what's in the hole as time goes on, and LLM is obviously what people do right now, and that's easy, but like, user behavior is changing, and not dramatically. So one thing that we forget, being in, let's call it, like, more tech hubby kind of like center of what's happening and being obsessed, is just how much the rest of the world is behind. So I was in the Philippines a few weeks ago, and I had to tell people what a neural network was. It was quite a eye-opening thing. So there's always a market, right, from a business perspective, that you can take advantage of, which is very interesting. But I think what propels me is a couple of things. One is, it's really like, so Sam Altman did an interview where he basically said there's two types of founders: one who bet on the technology today, and the others that bet on what the technology is going to look like tomorrow. And I'm actually trying to be the latter, because with today I can execute for today, but behavior is changing, and I don't want. I'll tell you my biggest fear. I don't trust OpenAI. Okay. And the reason I don't trust OpenAI is because their playbook, their strategy is, we're going to do everything for everyone. And as someone who's all for everyone finding fulfillment to be able to build their own dreams, that's a nightmare. you know, because if OpenAI can do everything, what the fuck are we all going to do, right?
Right.
And so I want to make sure that I'm you know, sticking it to the man, if you may, right? And so this is what's making me think about this, because I think I don't have the answer yet, you know, but I'm very curious about getting ideas. I'm not concerned about this for the next 2 years. Definitely not concerned about this for the next 2 years. But it's like, I want to be thriving. I want what I'm building now to be thriving in 5 years' time, and that's why I'm concerned about it.
I mean, the pace of change is increasing. Dan made a point earlier. It's really hard to keep up with everything, and you're constantly like, you know, how do you do it? I wrote a post on LinkedIn about exactly that. Like how, you know, you just calm down and you just take it one piece at a time. That's all you can do, right? One of the points you made, Uday, is that about Altman, what he said, there are two types of founders. Well, the founder that looks to the future probably has the resources to look to the future. Get a scrum master. Start with that. You know what I mean? Like the point I'm making is,
no, I know what you mean. I'm trying to run before I can even crawl. I get
the resources
it. No,
necessary to build your life on what the future might bring are, you know, are exponentially larger than the ones for what is right in front of you. You know what I mean? It's just not the same ball game. And look, AI is a reality. We're going to have to live with it. It's going to be present. We need to learn to include it in ways that are healthy in our software, in our projects, and so on and so forth. How, in whatever form, whether it's developers using it or whether it's us actually leveraging it. LLMs, Dmitry Makivsky, who is one of the founders of Dewais, is not on the call today, but he's not there, right, Pablo? No. But he would tell you LLMs are about to reach their quota. They're about to reach the point where, first of all, to grow them is going to be so costly, is going to be ridiculous. There's going to be a new wave of neural networks that are going to take over. So we don't know what these things are going to shape up to be and look like, you know, and we can only go in small increments. And I like that Dan brought up there's so much to keep up to in terms of new stuff and new technology. It's just a constant. It's a constant. And you can't be on top of all of it, and you end up having FOMO. You end up feeling like you're left behind. And in fact, you're not. You know, it's just a question of choosing your path by taking small pieces and saying, okay, right now we're focusing on this. Tomorrow this might need to change, but for today, this will be working. This will be delivering what I need. And you know, yeah, that's my view of it.
Thanks for sharing, Yannick. Appreciate that.
Because you're gonna lose your mind, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, you know, I was forced to become more aggressive with my output this past quarter, and my tech adoption has just taken up. I built an MCP without realizing I was building an MCP. It was really funny, but you know, it was good experience. But no, I appreciate what you've been sharing. You know, this has been a fantastic opportunity. I also, funny enough, I don't actually get the chance to speak to other people who lead product. I've only really, like, since I left Lisbon. So this is a really big opportunity for me, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken and Pablo have taken. You know, it's yeah, I'm sure everyone agrees. Are there any last questions before we? I'm mindful that I have to run to the airport and I haven't packed yet, so forgive me if I'm rushing you.
So I've put on screen the 12 tenets of Agile. I recommend that you look them up on Google or whatever your engine of choice, and just get familiar with them and understand them. Number 10 in particular, and this will apply to you, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And this is a concept that's hard to grasp for some, but it's the idea that, you know, you decide what doesn't need to exist within your project, you know, eliminating the wants, removing the wants, you know, identifying them and removing them. Just cleans up a lot, you know. So early on in your process, I don't know if you use the Moscow technique. No. Do you still have time?
Yeah, sure.
2 minutes?
Yeah,
Moscow.
I mean, listen, you're helping me make my dreams come true, so I have time, you know. So
Okay. Moscow, very simple. Must, should, would, must, should, could, won't.
okay.
Moscow.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
you start there. When you break down your epics, you break them down into user stories. You decide, okay, this we won't have, this we should have, this we could have, it's a nice to have, and this we must have. And to do that exercise, you need to negotiate with your stakeholders. You need to have that feedback loop from your end users so they can actually tell you what you must have and what you should have. And prioritize starting with that before you even go any further. It's a quick way to just start mapping out.
So I didn't know it was called that, but I do that.
Okay,
it's,
good.
I think, yeah, I spend a lot of time on customer discovery before I get started, and
Okay.
and then so it's this is partly why I feel a bit overwhelmed by the planning stage, because I kind of take it too. So as an urban planner and someone who does mega projects, great planning leads to good execution. So it's like it's but it's, I think, akin to what you've been saying in number 10 in particular. It took me a long time to appreciate. I think Bezos also said it. Strategy is the art of saying no to things.
Yeah.
You know, it's that kind of
Yeah.
sentiment, you know. And
Yeah.
and I think Steve Jobs used to say it as well, actually. Both of them, I've heard them both say it. So this is really powerful. I'm gonna have to say bye. If anyone wants to keep talking, just forgive me. I'm just going to be in the background. I'll switch my video off. But otherwise, you know, thank you so much, Yannick. Pablo, absolutely. Always a pleasure. I owe you an email and some information. Yeah, this has been emotional. Thank you.
Well, good, and good luck with your project, and go get a Scrum Master.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna do that. I'm literally gonna advertise who wants to learn to be a Scrum Master. Yeah, so it's all good. But thank you. Ciao. Should I close the call, everyone?
Yeah, thank you guys. It was amazing, fantastic
Yannick,
call.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, take care.
Take care.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your week.
You as well.